Alright, good afternoon. We're George, it's Nick, Travis. We're doing importing, exporting out of China. Two products is nickel and tobacco. Tobacco is coming out of the U.S. Nickel is coming out of China to the U.S. Just give you a brief overview about China and nickel and their industry. Give you a little bit of information about China themselves. China's had one of the highest growing GDPs in the last couple of years. Right now, because of the recession, it's actually gone down a little bit, maybe about like 0.5% to 1%, but they're still about 8.4, 8.5%, which is actually drastic compared to everybody else. The thing is, in China, the majority of their industry is actually government controlled. So about 63% of their industries is controlled by the government. This one right here, which is nickel coming out of China, about 64% is actually state controlled, which is the Jinchuan Group. That's the largest exporter of nickel and the producer of nickel-based products. Their currency is the yuan. Also, when you do trade with China, they actually prefer to get paid in their own currency, besides any other foreign domestic currencies for themselves. Right now, trading about 7 yuan per $1 US. And then they're also a high liquidity country, about $5 trillion in circulation in their economy. So they actually have a bunch of liquidities. But also the problem with that is that their currency is devalued by 20 to 30% compared to other foreign currencies. So they can actually monitor their currency to other ones, so they can inflate it or deflate it if they actually choose, seeing what's actually better for themselves. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into actually nickel. Nickel, they're actually one of the biggest producers. They do it in batteries and rechargeable. They're actually exporting out into the U.S., so big producer of nickel. The U.S., one of the highest consumers of nickel in the world. In the Americas continent, they consume about 51% of nickel, which that's actually including like Canada, Mexico, the U.S. obviously, and South America. A bunch of their nickel actually goes into rechargeable batteries. The only way that they actually get their nickel is actually by importing it from other countries, because they have no active mines for nickel. So the only way they actually get nickel in the U.S. is by getting it by a base product of palladium and copper. So that's the only way they can actually make it. But in recent years, consumption has gone down because of pig iron nickel that's coming in from the Philippines, which is a 200 grade, compared to other grades, which is about 300 grade. So, and also the high volatile prices is changing it as well, which means that if nickel changes in price, it's going to change the price in steel or other commodities, because they use nickel as the base product for those items. So it's huge fluctuations, so that's why consumption actually gone down. Next slide.
I'm going to be discussing the tobacco industry in China and the U.S. briefly. China is the largest producer of tobacco and cigarettes in the world. It is a government-owned monopoly, so they control basically 100% of the market share, and that is controlled by the State Tobacco Monopoly Administration, which functions under the China National Tobacco Corporation. China has very high import taxes and regulations on foreign tobacco. It used to be at about 65%. Recently it has dropped to 25% due to pressures from foreign countries and foreign organizations to open up the market a little bit more. And this has spurred companies such as Philip Morris to start doing joint ventures in China, allowing Chinese to manufacture their cigarettes and their tobacco and distribute them within the country. There's an estimated 320 million smokers in China today, so more than the population of the U.S. And being a government-owned monopoly, it netted $37.9 billion of profits in 2006 for the Chinese government. In the United States is one of the largest exporters of tobacco in the world. In 2004, they exported 243,000 metric tons of tobacco across the world. But recently, over the past 5 decades or so, export has declined due to the high quality and high prices of U.S. tobacco. And since it can be found more cheap in other regions, a lot of countries are buying tobacco from other countries. Although recently the drop to 25% in the import tariffs has increased the U.S. exportation to China and will hopefully spur their market. So now we're going to talk about exporting nickel back to
Alright, I'm just going to talk about the forms that actually used to export clearance out of China. You have like your export clearance forms to go out of the port of China. They actually, what we found, which was surprising, that China actually had some of the more numerous amounts of exporting documents. As you can see, there was 10 forms you need to actually get in order to export and get it out of the ports. The first one you need obviously is a commercial invoice. That one states like your HS code, your value, your shipment, where it's going to, whether you're doing the CIF or FOB, depending on which terms you're actually going to do it. The US and China both need that form. That's the same one that's going to transfer over to the importing side. And then before that though, you can start off with a pro forma invoice, which basically states almost the exact same stuff as a commercial invoice, but that one's sent prior to the importer so they can actually prepare all the documents they need at the importation side. So it gives them kind of like a heads up of what's going to be coming so you can get all forms and documents ready for them. The next one is the airway bill of lading. That one states the more obvious things such as weight, value, whether it's coming like CIF. That one's actually given, it comes in a multiply form, which is like the carbon copies. There's sometimes one's left at the exportation site, one at customs, one at importing. One of them gets to the final importer. So that one is kind of list the basic stuff so you can just check right off and go through customs easily. If you don't have that, you're kind of stuck because that's one of the more basic ones. Next one's packing list. That one states just what's actually inside the containers, which is your weight, your value, and most importantly, if you have more than 1 or 2 items coming or out of the country, that one will actually list individually what's in the container so they don't have to physically open up. Next one is the export certificate of origin. So the importer knows exactly where it's coming from, where the destination was, so if they have any problems with it, they can trace it back. As far as the exportation of the certificates goes, sometimes two of them are required. One of them from the acquisition and then quarantine from the People's Republic of China, and also a destination form from the Ministry of Commerce. So you have 2 different ones. They might be asked for, they might not, but it's actually better to have them filled out so that way you don't run into problems on the road if you're doing like exporting it out of the dock or into the importation site. That one goes in line with the exportation, inspection, quarantine application form. That one is kind of like the checkup of exactly what's being exported, so you know there's like nothing harmful being contained in the shipment itself. So when it gets too fine to the importation side, they all have no issues. To export things out of China, no matter what you have, you need an export license or permit. I know for the US, you don't need that for some things, but in China, you need to have them. If you don't get one in advance, you're going to delay your items and it's going to be stuck at the port or wherever you're going to be shipping them out of. Next one is the export packing containment inspection application form. That one, anything that's being shipped out of any container or any documents, you have to go ahead and file along with the commercial invoice. Other than that, you can't be to ship it out. The wood fumigation form or heat treatment form, if you're shipping anything via pallets or anything that's containing any other things besides what's actually in the shipment, then you have to go ahead and apply that as well, so they know that there's no problems being inside it. The last one is the declaration of non-wood packing materials. Simply states that there's no non-wood packing materials. This is exactly what the form says. Some of these forms will actually transfer over to the importation site, or the importing site. So some of the forms will travel over to